Welcome to Digitized Spotlight, your lens into the best builders in consumer crypto. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Winnie. On this series, we explore some of the latest trends emerging in consumer crypto and chat with those building at the forefront. On this episode, we dig into the intersection of whiskey, technology, and blockchain infrastructure.
We chat with Tzvi and Carrie, co-founders of Baxus, an on-chain whiskey marketplace that is built on top of Solana.
At Strobe, one of our core theses is actually replatforming Sotheby's, and Baxus is one example of that. They are unbundling Sotheby's for the spirits market, tokenizing rare whiskey and wine, and processing transactions in 2 minutes instead of the usual 30 plus days. I'm excited to jump in. Hey guys, hey Tzvi, hey Carrie.
Hey.
It's
Hello.
great to have you guys on this episode of Digitized Spotlight. You guys just announced a new mobile app and a bunch of exciting new features for Baxus at Breakpoint. Congrats. So I'm very excited to see and get to the nitty-gritty of it all. I've had a front row seat to all of the excitement through my seat at Strobe, and I'm excited for listeners to learn more about the evolution of Baxus and how you guys are replatforming the whiskey market on chain. I guess to start off, it'd be helpful to kind of maybe quickly introduce yourselves, a little bit about kind of the origin story, how you two came together. From what I understand, Tzvi, I know you were trading, collecting whiskeys, but what was like the aha moment that made you realize that you wanted to kind of build the entire spirits industry from the ground up? And Carrie would love to learn a bit more about how you were TAing that database course at Columbia that led you to meet Tzvi.
Yeah, so it really came from, I think, around, I'd always had an idea of trying to fix the system as how it existed, like because it was so inefficient, trading in these private groups and like everything kind of being gray market. But really, it hit during COVID when a lot of the people I was trading with, because it would take months for, a FedEx or UPS package to get delivered. So people were afraid of bottles sitting places or getting lost. So I would sell a bottle to someone who lived who knows where. And then they would say, can you just hold on to it for me? Like, I trust you. I know you. Can you hold on to this? And so I ended up getting to a point where I had like not only my own collection, but like every bottle I had ever bought and then sold sitting in my living room. And what would end up happening is some of the guys would be like, "Hey, I found a different buyer, or do you mind reselling this for me?" It basically I became like the clearinghouse and the broker all in one. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Well, why don't we just have a system where people can do this without it having to be like, oh, I know you, Tzvi, so I can trust you," as opposed to like, okay, I don't need to trust this individual. I can actually trade these things just seamlessly.
And then I was in college at the time, and I'd been doing like computer science, and I'd taken a distributed computing course about like fundamentals, origins of blockchains, like all that fun math stuff. And I was the head TA for this databases course, and it was during COVID, and it was like my senior year. And then all I remember is just this random man appearing with massive COVID beard and all of these whiskey bottles behind him, and I was like, "Who is this? Like
Like,
what?"
who is that? I
Like
want to be friends. How can I
I was
rob
like,
your vault at home?
absolutely. I was like, this is an immediate, like, tell me your whole life story. Like something has to happen here. Yeah, and that was like, I don't even know, like 4 years ago now, 4.5 years ago. Yeah, and then it was just exciting because then you actually took me to Queens. Like it was maybe like 2 months in or something. This was like the first time, and you sold like a pappy, I think, whilst holding the bottle before buying it at the store through like a Facebook group. And there were so many comments, and it was just like an immediate like, holy crap, this is a market, like there's such an opportunity here. Um, and yeah, and then we went from there.
The rest is history.
The rest is history.
To start at the beginning, for listeners that don't know what Baxus is, I know it's a whiskey marketplace. Can you talk about like what is happening? So if I am purchasing and bidding on a bottle, like what's happening behind the scenes?
Yeah, so from the very beginning, we have been built on Solana. So every single asset on the Baxis marketplace is an NFT that's tokenized on Solana. Every transaction is like a USDC for the actual token on the back end. So everything is actually on the blockchain, but when you're interacting with it, it doesn't actually present like a blockchain application. It just looks like a regular website. And we've done that really intentionally from the beginning. And when we first started off, it was like before FTX, it was like before all these like the highs and lows of like crypto, and everybody was like, oh, like why aren't you building on Ethereum? Why aren't you building on an L2? Like, what, like, and the gas fees are way too high. And there was like the only blockchain that was really able to work for us was Solana because it was so fast, it was so cheap. And it ended up being a great decision from our perspective over the last couple of years because we've been able to like grow and develop with the ecosystem. But it's yeah, and then we've been able to meet like so many amazing businesses that we also use their technology just because of the composability and the nature of it all, such that, you can now like have a bottle or, a barrel sitting in your collection, take a loan out against it. You can see real time, data about the where the asset is like sitting through like Helium, the IoT network. You can trade it. You can like all these
Yeah.
different things.
We'll get into some of the fun stuff in a bit,
Yeah.
but I feel like also Baxus culturally is quite similar to like when you say growing with Solana. I think it makes a lot of sense to be on Solana. Today, I think at Breakpoint, you're launching a new mobile app alongside the new Solana Seeker phone. Tell me a bit more about it. Anything you can tell us about this new price hunting feature that turns basically users into data collectors? And then I hear there's also a fun new mobile iOS app. Anything you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. T, do you want to talk about the deep inside of it?
Yeah, I'll do it a
You
little
get
briefly
so
because this
excited
is
about
I know,
it.
and this is like a culmination of so many things coming together. But like the thing about the whiskey community is that, and it is a community, and that is one of the really cool parts, is that like people, like again, there's these Facebook groups for people trading, but there's also groups with hundreds of thousands of people where they're just going to talk, post memes. It has a very similar culture in that way to
Yeah.
kind of crypto, like the way that
Absolutely.
crypto
I
operates
know
on X.
because as we were doing when we were doing diligence on Baxis a few years ago, I embedded myself into 10, 12 of these Facebook groups. And that was the last time I went on Facebook. And now I'm on Facebook Marketplace recently buying like furniture for my new home. And all I get is like whiskey bottle. I get tagged and things. And I was like asking everyone about Baxis in these groups. So it's like my post always gets brought up actually.
That's awesome. I'm glad that they had good things to say. But yeah, so really for us, like that was kind of like a critical piece of this is like again is that yes, there's this internet element, but you don't want to kill the culture. You don't want to
No.
kill like the fact that everyone kind of has this in some ways competitive and in some ways collaborative. Um, and so what's really cool about this is like whiskey hunters, and when I first got my start, like there's a thrill to driving to like a hole in the wall liquor store. Like you're in the middle of nowhere on the highway, you pass by someplace, like you pull in, you pull off the road. Like my wife can tell, her horror stories, and I'm sure every person who's in this space has like, from people that had to ride around with them. And what happens though is that the data aggregation, like where these bottles are, how many of them are still on the shelves, what their prices are, is really, really bad because so many, like the vast majority of liquor stores don't have websites. Even if they have websites, they don't have updated inventory, they don't have updated pricing. And so what we're basically turning these hunters in, who are going in anyways to like scan the shelves, look things over, see if there's anything worth buying, is the ability to now like scan those same shelves and those same bottles, but it enters it into a database. So now like you end up with this completely decentralized, like from the collection perspective, like you're decentralizing all of the data collection of effectively pricing on a localized level. So we'll know like, okay, we've got 15 different stores in this zip code, let's say in New Jersey where I live. We now know like what the average price for that area is, which is now super valuable also to users because they use our app, like the pre-existing app that like without the precursor to the Baxis app. They use that to like make sure that they're not getting ripped off in a store when they're trading on the marketplace. So we're now able to give like real fair market values. And again, it's all coming instead of it just being web scraping, which is what we do for secondary trading values and having people report. It's like you also turn it into a game. It's like Pokemon Go for adult men with too much time on their hands.
And I just add on the app currently you can vote on whether the price is actually fair or not. So not only are we crowdsourcing like the actual aggregation of the data, which gives us more like locations, all those different things, but then folks can actually vote on whether that makes sense or not, and whether they would like buy or sell at that specific price, which then, leads everybody to getting an actually accurate market value of that bottle.
And then I know you also are in the barrel business. So can you explain why barrels matter more than bottles, and what you're doing within that space?
Yeah, absolutely. I this is where I geek out about things. So when we first started Baxis, I think like the thing that Svi and I kept on talking about was, okay, we have this like representation on chain of this actual bottle, but how are we going to actually tie that specifically to the asset itself? Like you can mint an NFT for, a lot of different things, but how do you actually make sure that it, is up to date with like the underlying conditions of the asset? And so then we learned about Helium and like the LoRaWAN network and like IoT and all these different tools that you could use and sensors that you could use to give, real time like tracking information about the asset, statistics about whether it's actually in a good condition or not, and all these different things. And then in our first vault in New Jersey, we installed like some just very basic, like I was like on like Reddit threads, like figuring out how to do all this and like random YouTube channels of just, temperature sensors, humidity sensors, like location tracking. And then that then evolved into this product that we are calling Athena now. Our whole take on Baxus is that we have ancient like gods that we spell wrong. And so Athena was like the goddess of data and like wisdom. And so that's like how this sort of technology came here. And so with all of these distillers, specifically, we've been doing a lot of pilots in Kentucky right now. They have all of these barrels and all of these assets that they're sitting on that are just appreciating over time, and they don't really have great access right now to, inventory management, asset tracking. They don't have data about the actual maturation of the casks or, what the current temperature is of that specific cask. And folks are coming in from the retail markets and, buying like as a group just one cask together, from like a private barrel program or for the head distiller of the distillery to mix all these different barrels together. They are like interested in understanding different information about it. So we realized that we could take this product that we built specifically for our own vaults just to give folks on chain like a sense of security and transparency about the underlying asset and actually sell that as a service to all these different distilleries across Kentucky. And then we were like, oh, well, if we do that, then these distilleries can, and these rickhouses can actually just become vaults in and of themselves. And then that unlocks this entire massive barrel market. So yeah, so we've been working a lot. We've been going on a lot of trips down to Kentucky. It's been kind of awesome. And it's been really fun to take, I would say, like a lot of these distilleries on this journey of getting them to understand because if we come in as a blockchain company and we're like,
Yeah.
hey guys, like we're a tech startup out of New York, they're like, get out. Like what you
Yeah.
don't understand. You're trying to like pull the craft out of this. Like you guys are just making this terrible.
I love
So
that.
yeah,
I
so it's
love
been
that,
fun.
like, on the outset, you guys are this, like, consumer whiskey marketplace. That's what, like, people see. But then underneath, it's like a crypto company, better, faster rails, better ways of transacting, easier way to, like, kind of store, vault, your whiskey. And then, like, to these whiskey brands and distilleries, you're actually bringing them a wealth
Yeah.
of data information. So it's like, you're serving actually all parts of the stack and customer segment that people don't really see on the surface, which is really cool. I guess specifically on that point, but distillers, what are they actually like specifically like what are they learning about their own operations that, through the Athena technology that they didn't know before? Like what's like the insight there?
Ooh, good question. Okay, so I would say twofold. One, super basically, from an inventory, like asset tracking perspective, like giving just them the information about where the barrels are and where if they have barrels coming in from another distillery that like on trucks that need to be like put into the rickhouse, just giving them that sort of overarching information and letting them track the barrels on the roads, given the stickers that we're able to put on them. That's like an insight that they've never been able really to have before with like real-time feedback and real-time information. And then also just on the maturation side, like they don't really have any insight right now into the current temperature and the temperature fluctuations within their rick houses and the airflow and the ethanol levels. And the humidity. And so then that can create sort of novel, marketing opportunities for them to sell, specific barrels. Like this has been, sitting in this part of the rick house, and this is like, gives it sort of this flavor. It would be as if like terroir for wine is sort of like the kind of comparison that we're able to give distillers now because they actually have that information surrounding this. And so that's like specifically about their current operations that we can give them insight into. And then obviously like everything that comes along with, what we're going to keep on talking about with like the financialization element of the barrels. That's like completely new. And we're
Yeah.
really able to like create that market now because of this like underlying infrastructure.
Yeah, that's cool. I guess like, on this podcast, we love to cover new consumer trends. I'd love to understand some of the behaviors and psychology you're seeing behind these whiskey collectors in real life and on Baxis. Like, I know you guys did this like Thanksgiving turkey hunt where you mentioned that less than 10% of the bottles were actually redeemed, which is quite interesting because it kind of goes back to Tzvi, what you were saying earlier about how people were just asking you to store the whiskey, right? Walk me through kind of like what that means, what you make of that, and kind of like what you make of kind of how the whiskey collecting industry is changing maybe with Baxus.
Yeah, so one of the things that, when anyone comes in to make any changes to a legacy industry, you have those people like the OGs, so to speak, who start complaining and everything is ruined by, young people in technology. But one of the things that has actually been beneficial to them is we're doing a lot on the education and bringing in net new consumers. It's a similar thing that we talk about in the crypto world. Like one of the big benefits of Access is that by like taking something that otherwise would exist entirely off chain, and bringing those people to now start using through a credit card through like a totally like consumer facing platform, that's net new dollars coming into the crypto ecosystem that otherwise would have never been here. These are people that would have no interest necessarily in converting to stable coins unless there was something that they actually really wanted, which in this case is whiskey. And so it's similar to the whiskey world that we're doing with crypto people, because a lot of the crypto people who have participated in these things are either interested in whiskey or have tried some whiskeys. They might not be like experts or connoisseurs. Some of them are. Some of them are like, just as passionate about whiskey and or wine or different types of spirits. But what's really cool though is that they get to come on, they get to learn. We have like a really great team that does like Owen in particular, he's like our whiskey encyclopedia, and like he goes deep onto bottles and like produces these awesome articles and content and Twitter threads on like what makes these bottles interesting, especially the historic ones. So we have like a bottle of Madeira from 1770 that's like in the vault, like stuff like that that has like actual historic content. And so what we've noticed with those trends is that you now have this interesting split where people are more comfortable, whiskey people also are more comfortable buying bottles that they don't want to not have the chance to get later. So when we do like Bax's limited edition, single barrel pick, stuff like that, they'll buy the bottle and they won't redeem it now. Now they might redeem it in 2 months, 3 months. They might relist it for sale or get an offer and end up choosing to accept. So people who have never flipped a bottle of whiskey in their life, they just enjoy like drinking, they buy the bottle, it's sitting in the vault because they're like, I don't want to miss out on the opportunity. Maybe I'll buy this maybe I'll pick this one up in a couple of months, but they don't want to miss out. So they're like, I'm just going to buy it now and leave it in the vault. Like that's the easiest option for them. They could see it in their account. But because of the way that we've set up offers in like this real marketplace, they'll receive an offer on that bottle and be like, you know what, I was going to drink this one, but I'm getting offered 2 or 3x, and there's another bottle that I really want, and they can immediately rotate it into that. So I think that that is something that's super interesting. One particular anecdote from the turkey hunt, we were like going through the data, and this was truly one of the coolest things. So like our team, when they were analyzing the data, gave this to us. So we were doing part of the turkey hunt was wild turkey, right? So it was like wild turkey bottles. So we did a bunch of like their standard stuff that were dropped at like incredible prices. We had Bax's single barrel picks. We had their limited edition stuff. Like we had a ton of wild turkey inventory that was just going up, and people were spending 3 4 days like glued to their phones and computers, just like sitting there refreshing, trying to buy. We have one of our users actually, which is one of the coolest things about crypto, is that like people can get involved and build tools on top of it. So one of our users built like a Telegram listing bot. So it's just a channel where everything as it's getting listed is posted. And so we share that with our community. We're like, hey, if you want first insight, like right now, like, eventually these will become premium features on the app, but like join the Telegram bot while you can. Like this is, and people who again have never used Telegram in their life are downloading Telegram now for the sole purpose of being able to track like their what's getting listed when at the best prices. So we listed a bottle of Wild Turkey Beacon, which to those who don't know was this year's like limited edition last release within the Masters Keep series that Wild Turkey does, and it got rave reviews. Fingers crossed, we will have some prediction markets on this type of stuff soon. But if I were predicting, I'd say it's going to end up being the top whiskey of the year for probably like I'd say 40 to 50% of like whiskey reviewers, enthusiasts, like kind of like this. It really has a shot of being like people's like best one of the year. And so they were getting dropped on our platform at MSRP. So I don't know, 200, 250, whatever that price is, 300. But the market value is, in the 600, 700, sometimes even $900 range. So somebody actually bought the bottle, was able to get the snag on the MSRP, immediately flipped it into offers because there were offers sitting on those bottles already at a higher price. The guy who got it on the offer, so let's say he paid 300 originally, flipped it to a guy for 450. That guy then relisted it at whatever, 500, 550. He then
Yeah.
looked at it and he goes, wait, that's still too low. So the same initial buyer went and ended up rebuying the bottle and then relisting it. And somebody else picked it up later for like 750. Like he arbed the bottle twice in I think it was about 8 minutes because it was buy list, buy list, buy list. And what's so cool about that is again, like those are the types of things that when we talk about this, like whether it's auction houses or like the traditional way of doing things, that entire process would have taken months because you'd have to have the first auction go up and somebody buy it and then be like, oh, wait, that's actually not an efficient price. And then send it back to an auction 2 weeks later after they get the bottle or 3 weeks later, then wait for the auction to run. So we've condensed that entire process into, what took 8 minutes to 2 hours, let's say, to get the whole full sales cycle through. And what was great was that somebody still got to come on and pay the price that they were willing to pay. No one was forcing anyone to pay that price. Like none of the sellers were like upset that they didn't get, like on an auction where like if it doesn't hit the amount that you were hoping for, like they listed it and there were just people that were able to do, willing to take risk on like, okay, I think this is actually worth more and just, continue to keep the bottle moving. And it's that velocity of trading that is so exciting. And that's I think the coolest part of what we've built and what we're continuing to hope and scale is increasing velocity of trading and education and knowledge. So you can end up having not educated drinkers, let's say, people who are not, but really we're going to have people doing technical analysis, basically, I'm convinced, within like the next couple of years on like whiskey bottles, like literally looking at volume, volatility, stuff like that, where it's the collectors and the drinkers are like, hey, this is my favorite bottle. I just want to buy this because I want it. And somebody else is like, well, I actually think that this is trending in the right direction as an asset.
Yeah, that's super exciting. And I know you've been working with premier brands, and I think you were talking about now like a 600, $700 bottle, but I'm understanding that there's like a 30K bottle that was dropped. And it was the first time it was available in the US. How did that how did that go, and what did that signal to the industry? And what does this mean for brands that are now kind of going direct to consumer through your platform?
Louis the 13th. Was this the one that when I went to the vault, I like put the NFC chip on?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
insane. Yeah.
So that was a super cool one also. So that was the Louis the 13th cognac, which is, one of these super legacy history, going back however many hundred years, like in France. And for the first time, the US has like a governing body that regulates alcohol, like including what sizes you're allowed to release alcohol bottles in. And so for the first time, they actually changed the rules that enabled 3 liters. Like you could now have a 3-liter bottle of hard alcohol as opposed to just wine. And so a lot of brands were trying to find interesting or things that they could do. And so these were being sold in Europe prior, but this was the first time this bottle was going to be available in the US. And the brand, we had connected with them and they wanted a way to do 2 things. One was like to effectively secure interest and intent of like for pre-sale of like who would actually want to buy this bottle. And then 2, to be able to sell it to them and then have one entity handle the distribution, because otherwise, due to liquor laws, they'd have to like find local stores in each state that these people lived in to try and like get the whole process done. And so instead they were able to come to us, have the entire process set up, like again with this token that basically served until the bottles actually cleared customs and through export and everything, and then we were able to then fulfill and actually get them to the collectors themselves. And so that was something that was really, really cool. I think the bottles were, I think they were like $35,000 a piece or something. They were even, and that was like the pre-sale deals that they were getting from the brand, because the actual MSRP was like $40,000. Like it's an opportunity to like balance for brands also. And this is a big part of the app. And like, again, having both this ability to collect and store prices, and whether or not, Carrie mentioned, whether or not you think something is fair, but also to add to your wish list. Because now for the first time, brands will have insight, and we have insight into saying like, okay, we know who the target consumers for these bottles are. So when they hit the vaults, or when somebody says, I have these in my collection, we can now match buyers and sellers who might live halfway around the world. Because we know what they have and what they're looking for on both sides. So that becomes like super cool. And that one was just a ton of fun because, I mean, Winnie, you saw those bottles. They were huge. They're gorgeous. They're in like Baccarat crystal decanters. They
They're
come with like your
insane.
own, like, I think they call it a spear or something. Like you can't pour the bottle because it's too heavy. So you have to take like a pipette, basically a giant pipette, and like dip it into the bottle to like extract. It's like a whole process. There's a ceremony when they do it, which speaks a lot to the history. But what was really cool for the industry was taking, to your point, like what did it signal, was one of the oldest, most established brands in the industry that has been doing things the old school way for the longest time, was like, okay, we're actually going to embrace like some of these technological changes and innovations, and we're going to lean into this because it's going to actually make our process better. And that's a big part, like Carrie was saying before, is like we're not coming in we see this in industries all the time where somebody's like, wait, this industry is outdated. We're going to disrupt. We're going to change. And then you get there and the industry is like, no, thank you. Like, we're not interested. We come at this from the perspective of people who are, like, we're really passionate. We care a lot about the spirits world. We care a lot about the producers, the actual distillers and all these people. And so our solutions are geared towards solving actual problems they have and listening to them of like, what are issues that you're having with this brand or your distribution, or and then figuring out, okay, how do we use the technology we have at our advantage to actually
I love
make to
that.
accomplish that.
Yeah, it's like you're not changing it and completely changing how the way they are doing things today. You're keeping a lot of the traditions, culture, and it's very much embedded in the like spirit of Baxus. Um, but while also having these like actual improvements in technology and making it better and more efficient. One thing I love about both of you guys is you guys are both really entrenched in the on-chain ecosystem within Solana, but also beyond. As a consumer crypto marketplace, what are some interesting like new primitives? For instance, you mentioned meme coins, which I know you guys have done some experimentation there with the drink token, but also like maybe even prediction markets. I think recently we saw StockX work with kind of Kalshi. Like, how do you think about some of these new primitives that you see in the broader on-chain ecosystem, and how do you kind of, think about embedding that within Baxus?
Yeah, so I'll kick off first because I think there's two. This is one of the most fun parts, and again, one of the
It's
reasons I
been
love
every
running
one of our
Baxis
phone calls for like the last 2 weeks. Yeah, so you
is
you
that
start
like
up.
is that like Carrie will call me and she's like, "Did you see this new pull request that went into the GitHub repo of like one of these projects?" And I'm like, "No, I promise you I did not." Like, I under note like that I absolutely did not go like. And she's like, "Well, there's this new system that you can use for payments and agentic payments like with the X402s and all these things." And I'm like, all right, talk to me like a consumer. How does this change my life? And then on the flip side, I'm sitting here looking at all these things and I'm like, Carrie, did you see this new like NFT standard that you can use to like, and she's like, no, like, where would I have seen that? So it's really fun that we get to go back and forth because we both do have like, that like at the end of the day, it's all about the consumer focus. And that was really, Carrie pointed that earlier, like why we built initially on Solana was we knew that our target users were not going to be loading up their wallets with crypto and figuring out gas fees. And so we knew we would have to cover those costs. And so for us, it was so important to find a place that was, inexpensive and able for us to build to scale. So, so the prediction markets is something that I get like really excited about. Again, as a former poli sci nerd and everything, like it's just very cool to see kind of how data like ends up aggregating in that way. And what makes it fun for people obviously is, now you can, sorry, not, you're not betting because you're not gambling. You can predict on anything. You can make you put your money where your mouth is literally. If you have a prediction or you have a sense or you believe something like will end up happening. But what's really cool about it also, and this is some stuff that we've discussed, and we're hopefully talking to a couple of these big players as well to see about integrations, is that there's also value in which from a financial perspective, where where it actually matters for you to be able to hedge, for these types of things, for traders, for collectors. So if you're, let's say, a pure crypto trader who's looking to take a big position in whiskey or something, or one of these types of brands or products, and there's a brand or product that has a ton of hype, but you're not a drinker, so you don't know okay, is this short-lived hype? Is this something that'll actually sustain? You can then spin up or play on a prediction market that predicts okay, where is the price going to be for this bottle? Will it be above or below X price by 2026, the end of 2026? So you now have a year to accumulate your position and potentially offload it. That's a real actual hedging. I saw a market this morning that resolved will Cloudflare have another outage in 2025? And there was an outage today and it resolved, and somebody's like, that's actual Cloudflare insurance. That's an ability now for a company to have insurance against the fact that Cloudflare might go down, is to trade these markets as an actual financial instrument. And so I think that that's really cool, as it's still gamified for the user, where they still feel really like they're focused on I think that this bottle is going to be worth X, and so I'm willing to make that bet, because again, there isn't enough when you're talking about physical settlement to be doing regular long shorts, perps. All of those synthetic markets are going to take time to mature. But prediction markets help you do that. But at the flip side, you also have this ability to do prediction markets, but also opinion markets. And so that has me really excited, because I was talking about the beacon before. I tried a whiskey and I'm like, I think this is going to be the best whiskey of the year. Now, what you use to settle that, who is the oracle, where you pull, that's going to be something for the market, to decide, determine what you use as the oracle. But we have something kind of fun in mind that we're going to hopefully roll out when we get this going, which is one of my biggest issues with all whiskey awards every year. First of all, they're pay to play. So if you're not paying, your brand's not getting submitted. which again means that some of the best whiskeys in the world are not necessarily actually going into these contests. And two, they've gotten to the point where they had to invent new medals. They're like, we have the triple platinum medal, not to be confused with the double platinum medal or the single, because if you're paying these brands now, like they can't not give you a medal. You can't submit something and end up like, no one's going to go home without, like, they'll be like, great, I'm never submitting anything again. And what I love is like kind of like the Rotten Tomatoes model. So Rotten Tomatoes has the expert score, like what these brilliant expert, movie reviewers write. But in reality, I don't care what the experts write. I want to go look and be like, all right, what do the people who watch this movie think? So some of these like, movies that get like incredible rave reviews, and then like you look at the people and they're like, this was the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. Like I'm going to trust the aggregated collection of information coming from the masses rather than the people who are like, the cinematography was beautiful. And I'm like, that's lost on me. Um, and so what's really cool about this is like we have the ability now, because of our distribution network, because of the hundreds of thousands of users across our app and our ecosystem, to do anonymous, like literally like you try something and you don't know what it is and you just give it ratings and you just give it a rating and a review. Like you get a sample from Baxus and you just write a review. And now all of a sudden we're aggregating tens of thousands of different rankings where you're not getting the bias of, you talk to people about Van Winkle and like most people will hold it in the highest reverence because it's so famous and it's so expensive and it is good. But if I were to give you a Van Winkle blind, I'm curious if somebody would say like, "Oh, this is the best whiskey I've ever had," versus when they see the label. So you can kind of eliminate all of that bias, and like then it starts to get really interesting when it comes down to the review time and like to see what is like the crowdsourced opinion, and then you let people predict on that because it's also a not manipulatable market. You can't go onto the earnings call and start reading off a list of things to start manipulating like the outcomes. It's okay, great. I don't know who the 10,000 judges are, and I definitely don't, and they don't even know what bottles they're reviewing. So, anyways, that's like long-winded, but
No, I love that.
yeah,
I think one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about with prediction markets and new social networks is how accurate you predict things be a function of maybe like your Baxis reputation score and kind of your profile. Like today, like we have these Yelp reviewers, and remember the back in the era where there was like Yelp Elite, but that's very subjective. Like how can you have, somehow factor in prediction markets and your accuracy there into kind of how actually expert you are. I don't know. I think that could be very interesting when you think about more verticalized prediction markets and more verticalized social networks. And maybe you guys will be building that within that mobile app. I don't know. We'll see.
That would be exciting. So beyond prediction markets, you're looking into the lending space. You've mentioned perpetuals and fractionalization. Can you talk a bit about asset-based lending, what you're doing there, and how do you think about spirits becoming a legitimate alternative asset class?
yeah. So Athena is actually so two sides of it. The issue prior to this was, there are certain types of things you can get loans against. Obviously, like non-traditional assets, it's very difficult though. Like there are people that do it in the art world and they do it well, and it takes a lot of underwriting. And the reason they're able to do it though is because these pieces are also insured. Like there's a hedge for the underwriter, for the lender. There are very few insurance companies or places that are going to underwrite a bottle of whiskey that's sitting on your bar that like, someone comes over and opens it up and like, great, so I've loaned you X amount of dollars against it and where'd it go? Like, oh, I drank it accidentally. Like it becomes really difficult. And so what's super interesting now is because the bottles are in our vault, like we serve as the custodian and we have all of the pricing data and the pricing history and like real-time markets to figure out like what you could actually liquidate like a defaulted bottle in. You're able to now start to aggregate capital in a way where it's like, hey, you can now lend against an entirely new asset class, something that was not previously recognized or didn't have that capability. So we've already been able to originate a couple of $1 million worth of loans using, again, existing Web3 DeFi protocols to be able to like get like we give all the pricing history, and the valuations, and then the lenders and the borrowers are able to go back and forth and actually negotiate the process over there. But where it gets super interesting is on the barrel side, like because that's where the bottles is great, and people will take loans for different things. They don't want to have to sell their collection. The market's slightly down. They want to do something, they want to buy a gift and it makes sense. Like we see this with kind of, people borrow against everything. We see it in crypto all the time, like things that they want to hold long term. They don't want to actually sell to realize profit from. But on the barrel side, what makes it super complicated, and it's literally going on right now, there's like a massive case about this. So there's a distillery in Tennessee that's in the process of like a bankruptcy proceeding because they defaulted on like over $100 million worth of loans. And one of the biggest issues at the heart of the case is that 25,000 barrels that were used to underwrite the loan apparently don't exist. Like they were either like they were either double committed or they weren't actually there. Like their inventory wasn't properly checked and underwritten. And what's really difficult is, well, how do you tell one barrel from the next? If you're going and doing underwriting and they show you all these warehouses, where is the in the way that you have with like a token, like I know when it was minted, I know who's the current wallet it's in, I know who the owner is, I know all of the claims if it's in a DeFi protocol, like if there's a lien. When it comes to a barrel, if I show you a barrel, how do I know you have the right to sell it to me? And so that's why the putting it on chain becomes so interesting, and why the Athena product that Carrie has developed is so critical, is because now you have an individualized sticker that goes on that tracks all of this data that's really useful to the distillery for their production purposes, but also really useful to them from like the provenance and the ability to prove like ownership, which means that now they can sell to an entirely new customer base who doesn't ever have to come and visit or borrow from a new base who doesn't ever have to come and visit the distillery to go and do audits and checks, because it is being done, like the technology is there to now conduct those audits and checks. And so that opens up entirely new forms of capital, places where it'll come from. There's, one of the things that gets us really excited is you look at like treasuries now, and like the people keep predicting Fed rate cuts, which means that like you're going to end up having all of these stable coins and these businesses who are predicated on you give us your money and then we earn 4% from the Fed. Well, that's not going to be possible anymore. Their margins are going to get crunched, smaller and smaller. And so they're looking for new ways. You saw this with Tether is now announcing that it's not just treasuries. They now have gold and Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Like they're diversifying into other types of assets. And so what becomes really cool is when you have this unique asset class like whiskey, which has its own market cycles, but they're not correlated to the broader like equities markets or like global markets in the same way. And so these treasuries that are sitting there with hundreds of millions of dollars on chain that are looking for yield now have a new place where they can deploy it on chain. So the capital stays on chain in that way. But again, what ends up happening and benefits the crypto industry writ large is these guys are willing to pay 12, 15, sometimes even higher percentages on an annual basis, because A, the value of the maturation of the underlying assets, the whiskey appreciates more than the amount that they're paying. And B, there just isn't as much capital that they can access. And so they really need the operating capital. And so if there's $100 million of loans deployed and they're pulling in, $12 million a year of interest, that interest is coming back on chain in the form of stable coins that's now being redistributed to crypto-based lenders. So now, as opposed to right now where so much of our markets are just the same people trading against each other in the same cycles, I'm borrowing against my Bitcoin from somebody else who's lending me with USDC that he's borrowing against his ETH. Like it's now we have net new dollars flowing in from an industry that otherwise would not be coming on chain in any way, shape, or form. And that's, $12 million coming out of the quote unquote real, world economy into the crypto economy. And so that also gets me really excited, because it's something that will ultimately end up benefiting our entire crypto industry, is when they were able to find net new ways to bring cash in from, again, for users who don't necessarily care. We've abstracted the complexity part of the blockchain. For them, it's you have barrels, you have a website that you can log into, you can click on the loans, and the cash goes right into your bank account. Like
I love
it makes
it.
it very simple. Yeah.
This was great, guys. To close it out, I wanted to end with some fun rapid fire questions. Let's start with Carrie. Most undervalued bottle of whiskey.
I think Todd knows what I'm gonna say. So it's not underrated. People know about it, but it's just the best one, and it's $55. Is the Heaven Hill 10-year bottled and bond. It's like my go-to ride or die. That's the last whiskey I will ever drink.
Love it. I'm gonna buy it now. It's the holidays. Todd.
I'm gonna try and one up Carrie on this one. No, not actually, but basically the 7-year Heaven Hill bottled and bond, which is the one that Carrie's talking about, used to be the 6-year bottled and bond, but they discontinued it, and that one used to be a $20 bottom shelf bottle, but now they've improved the packaging, aged it an extra year, so it's 55. But no, I'm kidding. That's undervalued bottle of whiskey. I would actually go with like a Russell's 10 or a Russell's
Yeah.
Reserve, the Wild Turkey products, like also in that 55 to 60, $70 range. And they produce great whiskey.
So
Like it's
good.
always great whiskey, and they're not upselling. People aren't trying to rip you off on them. Like you can find them. They sell out, but because people are drinking them, not because they're sticking them away and hoarding them and collecting them. So I think like a good one of the like Wild Turkey, core products, I'd say, is probably that for me.
Nice. What about what's like either of you, a fun whiskey fact or piece of lore?
You've so many.
You guys
Oh,
have
we have
so
so
many, which
many.
is
I'm just
why.
trying to.
Yeah, like a
Well,
good juicy one that people will enjoy.
all right. Okay. I mean, this is my favorite one all the time. Is that like whiskey is America's original cryptocurrency? Like actually though, that like farmers, it was proof of work. So farmers in the Midwest,
I
like
love it.
or in the West, in Ohio, Pennsylvania, um, they first of all, they didn't believe in like, this printed money that was coming out of these big cities. They wanted real tangible things. And so the only way that they could preserve their corn and their wheat and their grain was to turn it into alcohol. And so they would do that so that like their excess grain would basically become alcohol. And then they would, the reason whiskey gets aged now is because they would go into barrels so that they could ship it up and down the rivers to transport it. So while it was sitting inside of those barrels, it started to mature. And that's how we kind of get like where we are now. And then it got the first tax in the United States that was ever imposed was actually the whiskey tax, because Alexander Hamilton needed a way to fund the national bank. And so he viewed whiskey and alcohol as just, oh, it's vice. It's something that just the people in the big cities are drinking. But the people, it led to an actual rebellion called like the Whiskey Rebellion. And people in like, Pennsylvania, Ohio were like, wait, you're taxing our real money, our proof of work, our cryptocurrency, so that you can print fake paper dollars. Like we had this argument 250 years ago, and we're still having it today.
I love it. Wait, I haven't heard you make that analogy, and just like aging in the barrel is just like staking it.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
first cryptocurrency. Okay, last one. What's an on-chain collectible? Like if you think about, Baxus, you think about these like Pokemon cards, other types of collectibles art. What's a prediction you have about this kind of whole category?
Carrie, you want to take
Oh gosh, that's hard. Like, I don't know, it's like the unbundling, then the rebundling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
think
gonna be.
yeah, it's like we unbundled Sotheby's. So now there's like all these different separate marketplaces, right? And then there's inevitably going to be like a
Oh, I love
rebundling
that.
because it's
Yeah.
all composable on chain. And
Wait,
then
I
there will
love
be
that.
another unbundling of that and then a rebundling. Yeah.
Life
that.
is just the unbundling and rebundling of everything.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, Carrie, that's spot on. I think that we're gonna see like the curation layer, because one thing on
Yeah.
Baxus and these marketplaces is like you've got bottles on Baxus that are $15 and bottles that are $150,000. And those obviously appeal to different consumer groups. And I think that because we handle the logistics, the authenticity, you're gonna end up having, and we only charge, sellers fees. So we don't, if somebody wants to come and build something on top of us where they
Yeah,
curate
like
bottles and send out a list and they
that's
charge
great.
buyers fees, like they make their money some other way because it's fantastic. They're moving more volume on our platform. So that's a great call, Kara. I think that
Yeah.
that's what you're going to see is like somebody who's taking high-end watches on chain or high-end Pokemon cards and melding it with high-end whiskey and other things to like target a specific audience. That's a great call.
Which
Yeah,
is like
that's a
the
great
whole
call.
nature of like what we, that's like the composable nature of like what we're doing, right? It's like we were always like the brand of Baxis was always supposed to be like transparency and like that, like actually like vaultings of the assets. And then like there's so many things you can do on top of it. It's crazy. So
Awesome. Well, Carrie and Svi, it's been great to have you on Digitized Spotlight. Where can listeners find you and learn more about Baxus?
Best place is Twitter. We keep people pretty up to date on there. So Baxus Co, Baxusco. Um, Carrie is also on Twitter, although she tweets very,
not a
very,
great
very
Twitter person.
limitedly, which is why I have notifications on, because whenever I see that there's a tweet from Carrie,
You're the first like on all my tweets. It's really sweet.
So
It's
because
cute.
I have notifications on, because I'm like, if she's tweeting, it's usually something important.
like,
Um,
yay, let's incentivize the behavior. That's great.
and so for me, you could web for like the number 4 and the letter O, web 40. I've got, take some whiskey and pretty much every other thing that comes along in the crypto world. I'll have some thoughts on there. But I would say definitely about Baxus, like the Twitter page is the best place. If people are Instagram, we post like great photos and like interesting stuff about bottles that are coming in. Facebook, if people are still using that. So we're
Email
across
us
kind
at
of
info@Baxis.
And download the app.
Download
download
the
the
app on
app.
the App Store, on Seeker, iOS, Android, all the above.
Exactly.
Love it. Thanks for coming on, guys. This was so fun.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us as we chat with Carrie and Svi. It's been fascinating to learn about how Baxus is tokenizing whiskey and building a next generation marketplace.
It's cool to see them build a consumer product in the front and crypto in the back, with data and technology benefiting the distilleries and also the whiskey brands. Feels like a win-win-win for all those involved. Follow us as we chat with more founders building at the intersection of consumer and crypto. Bye.
Bye.